Hidden in the rolling hills of County Durham lies HMP Deerbolt, a facility meant to serve as a training ground for young male offenders, a place to reset their trajectory before they spiral deeper into the system. But behind the fences and bland Ministry of Justice branding is a prison that's crumbling in every sense of the word. What was once a place of potential correction has quietly become a warehouse of wasted futures. The 2025 inspection of HMP Deerbolt reveals a place buckling under the weight of neglect, violence, confusion, and institutional amnesia. The prison isn't just struggling to function. In many ways, it's forgotten what it was even built to do. HMP Deerbolt holds some of the most vulnerable prisoners in the country. Young men, many with chaotic childhoods, special educational needs, mental health challenges, and long histories of being failed by every system meant to support them. And yet, once inside the walls of HMP Deerbolt, they find more of the same: under-resourced services, inconsistent leadership, and a daily routine that oscillates between mind-numbing boredom and explosive chaos. Officers walk the landings with resignation, knowing that each day is just about getting through, not about progress, not about change, not about justice, just survival. At the time of the inspection, almost half the prisoners were locked in their cells during the working day. That's right, in what's supposedly a training prison for young adults. Less than half were regularly accessing purposeful activity. Education, the one thing that might genuinely change someone's life, was sparse, badly managed, and routinely cancelled. Workshops were either empty or short-staffed. Some learners turned up just to find no one available to teach. For those who did manage to attend classes, the curriculum was outdated and uninspiring. And for those with learning needs, the picture was even worse. Some were left completely unsupported. Imagine being 19 years old, trapped in a cell for 22 hours a day, given no training, no skills, and no hope of release with dignity. That's not rehabilitation, that's social abandonment. The regime was fragmented and incoherent. Staff shortages and constant wing closures meant many prisoners didn't know what their day would look like. Sometimes they'd get exercise, sometimes they wouldn't. Visits were inconsistent, and many reported that their families had lost faith in the prison's ability to deliver even basic communication. In-cell telephones were supposed to be a lifeline, but they were often used as leverage in wing politics, with vulnerable prisoners charged by their peers just to make a call. Violence remained entrenched. There were high levels of assaults, both between prisoners and against staff, and much of it was fueled by debt, bullying, and a thriving underground economy. Cannabis and spice were reportedly still available, and intimidation was a daily reality. The use of force by staff had gone up significantly, but oversight and scrutiny of these incidents had gone down. There were allegations that some restraint incidents weren't accurately reported, and the prison's own violence reduction strategy had become a bureaucratic afterthought. Young prisoners spoke about violence as if it were the weather, something that just happens, something to expect. Many of these young men had complex trauma histories, and yet mental health provision at HMP Deerbolt was not only stretched, but almost absent in some areas. Waiting lists were long, staff were overburdened, and prisoners in crisis were often managed through segregation or isolation rather than therapeutic intervention. The safer custody team, in theory, existed, but its powers were weak, and its presence, according to many prisoners, was invisible. There were men on suicide prevention plans whose cases hadn't been reviewed for weeks. Others spoke of asking for help, only to be told to wait until Monday, even if they were in crisis on a Friday. The buildings themselves, while more modern than some older Victorian prisons, were plagued with faults. Maintenance was sluggish. Some cells had no working toilets or sinks. Heating systems failed in winter, leading to prisoners sleeping in jackets and gloves. Others were housed in cells where windows wouldn't close, or worse, had broken panes. And let's not forget, this is a population of young adults, many of whom have already experienced homelessness, instability, and neglect. To house them in degrading conditions is to repeat the failures of the past. Staffing was the final nail in the coffin. Recruitment and retention were both in crisis. Many officers were young, inexperienced, and simply not trained to handle such a complex, high-risk population. Senior managers were constantly firefighting, reactive instead of strategic. Staff morale was in freefall. The relationship between staff and prisoners, which inspectors tried to highlight as a strength, was more often described by prisoners as distant, inconsistent, or barely there. There was no culture of aspiration, no drive to improve. Just a tired institution with tired people going through tired routines. Perhaps most concerning of all was the institutional memory loss. Previous inspections, some of them scathing, had made dozens of urgent recommendations. Very few of them were implemented. In some areas, conditions had actually worsened. The prison had no credible strategy for improvement. Senior leadership was described as fragmented. Accountability was muddled. When asked what their vision for the prison was, some managers had no answer at all. A place without direction, without clarity, without leadership, drifting while the lives of young men spiral down the drain. This isn't a minor concern. These are not just teething problems. This is a systemic failure of duty. The prison service claims to be committed to rehabilitation, to second chances, to unlocking potential, but HMP Deerbolt offers none of those things. It is not a stepping stone, it is a dead end, and now we ask you, what happens to a society that leaves its most damaged young men locked in cells for 23 hours a day? Why are we shocked by reoffending rates when our training prisons offer no training? How many more inspection reports will we ignore before someone is held accountable? And finally, if a young man dies by suicide in a prison like HMP Deerbolt after asking for help and getting none, whose fault is it? Let us know what you think. The silence is costing lives. A female prison officer has appeared in court after being accused of forming an inappropriate relationship with an inmate at HMP Deerbolt. Stacey Sutherland, 27, stood before Newton Aycliffe Magistrates Court, facing a charge of willful neglect of duty while working at the County Durham Young Offenders Institution. The allegation claims Miss Sutherland, who is from Barnard Castle, the same town as the prison, breached the public's trust by engaging in a relationship with a prisoner between April 1st and May 14th. During the brief 5-minute hearing, Miss Sutherland spoke only to confirm her name, address, and a date of birth. District Judge Tim Capstick granted her unconditional bail and ordered her to appear at Teesside Crown Court on December 6th. HMP Deerbolt is a Category C facility designed to house offenders who are not suitable for open conditions but are considered unlikely to attempt escape. The prison typically holds around 500 inmates aged 18 to 21, mostly serving sentences of up to 4 years. In a separate development, prison staff began photocopying all incoming mail and photographs after discovering that some had been soaked in liquid spice. The synthetic drug was reportedly sprayed onto letters by friends on the outside, allowing prisoners to smoke it or sell it once inside. A rogue prison officer who brought drugs and other contraband into a young offenders institution, YOI, at the request of inmates, is now behind bars herself. Within months of starting work at HMP Deerbolt YOI near Barnard Castle, Lisa Jane McClelland was secreting prohibited items into the establishment to pass on to young inmates. Durham Crown Court heard that despite her previous claims that she was being pressured by prisoners, there was no sign of duress or apparent threatening messages found on her phone. But there was also not said to be any evident financial motivation for the officer, putting her job and liberty at risk. Paul Cleesby, prosecuting, told the court Miss McClelland began working at HMP Deerbolt and as an operational support guard in November 2020, initially doing late shifts on the gate, but in March 2021 she began teaching hairdressing, barbering, which brought her into contact with inmates. By May last year, police received intelligence that she was bringing contraband into the institution. She was approached by a detective as she entered the visitors area on May 11th last year. Miss McClelland was told she was suspected of being in possession of controlled drugs and would be searched. Although she made an initial denial, when she was taken with a female officer to a private room to be searched, she handed a package over saying, "I've got something." Mr. Cleasby said the wrapped item was in an envelope in a clear plastic bag in her pocket. Asked what was in the package, she claimed she did not know, but on examination, it was found to contain smaller packages of white and brown powder, 4 miniature phones, 6 SIM cards, 2 USB sticks, mobile phone leads, folded strips of paper and tobacco. Further examination confirmed the powder was crack cocaine, cannabis and pregabalin, respectively Class A, B and C drugs. In her initial police interview, Miss McClelland declined to comment on the advice of a legal representative, but after confirmation was received of the contents of the package, she said an unknown male took it to her house at a time she was not present. It contained pills, which she said she threw away, and a list of phone numbers she agreed to pass on to an inmate. She also said she took tobacco in for the inmate, knowing it was illegal, placing the items in a rubbish bin on the landing to be collected later by the inmate. But she said she was then asked by another prisoner to bring items into HMP Deerbolt, knowing the package would contain prohibited items, adding that she was threatened with having her house burned down or having a car driven into her home if she refused. Mr. Cleasby said CCTV footage on the E-wing landing showed the defendant had twice previously placed items in the bin to be collected prior to the day of her arrest. A statement by HM Deerbolt Governor Ian Richardson was read to the hearing by Mr. Cleasby, in which he said the presence of drugs in prison environments undermines security and can place both inmates and staff at risk of violence. Mr. Richardson said the value of drugs in prisons can be 10 times of those outside such an enclosed environment. He added, "The dishonesty and lack of integrity displayed by Lisa Jane McClelland, who has provided an abundance of support and trust, is perhaps the most disappointing element of this." Miss McClelland, 51, of Cranley Road, Hilton Castle, Sunderland, admitted 6 counts of conveying prohibited items into a prison. Kelly Lodge, mitigating, said the defendant, who has no previous convictions, runs her own hairdressing business, which she would be forced to close if she was to receive an immediate prison sentence. Ms. Lodge said, as work dried up during the COVID lockdown, the defendant turned to working as a prison officer through a recruitment agency. She is well aware of how serious this is, and she deeply regrets her actions and the impact on her business and family. Judge Joe Kidd told Miss McClelland, "It's unclear why you were prevailed upon to begin supplying contraband within a prison. You have provided no explanation for that whatsoever," said Judge Kidd, who considered there to be no financial motive behind her actions and no reference that she acted under duress. She described the package Miss McClelland was caught with as significant, with a high value within the prison estate. Despite requests by Ms. Lodge to impose a suspended sentence, Judge Kidd said it had to be an immediate sentence for the deterrent effect. Those who are employed within the prison estate should understand fully what the consequences are of committing offences of this nature. Imposing a 31-month sentence, she said it would have been one of 42 months had Miss McClelland not pleaded guilty.